Well, you want to talk about Wednesday?
Wednesday, I did watch.
Well, shame on you. You were supposed to stay up late on Wednesday, but we'll get to that, and then we'll get to the main event on our program, which is, of course, the watch along, the actual wrestling portion of our program. However, again, another week where AEW started off. Wow, this is great, and then steadily every segment descended into chaos. AEW Dynamite for March 23rd, as soon as they come on the air, like Mussolini with his dog Larry. Did you see that Larry was embroidered or emblazoned on Punk's warm-up jacket?
I actually didn't notice that, no.
You didn't notice that?
I didn't.
You thought Punk's real name was Larry?
I guess I just didn't pay attention to the placement of Larry, however it was placed.
Larry's a fine little puppy. But anyway, we had CM Punk versus Dax Harwood in a singles match. I wrote wrestling, ! Because it was so surprising. In a vacuum, if you didn't know anything else about the wrestling industry, what promotion was on top, what promotion was big or small, who was where, and you just watched this match, and then you turned and you watched any WWE program pretty much just about, even the good matches they have, you would think that this AEW was the major league promotion. Because even when the WWE lets the guys that they have that can go have a good match, it doesn't look, the people aren't into it as much because the WWE fans have been taught that matches are the meaningless breaks in between entrances and Zoom calls. This had two quality professionals, experienced veterans, one guy a major name, the other guy should be a major name, but the booking of him has been rotten. The people were into it. You had announcers that sounded like, that every once in a while they were calling a wrestling match, unlike on the other program. Just in a vacuum, just watch this match and watch anything from the WWF, and you would think AEW is the major league. And then you would watch another segment of AEW and go, what the fuck was I just thinking? Every time they make a good impression, they have to put shit on the same show that will negate that. So let's talk about the positive first. Obviously, again, Punk and Dax. I mean, I don't even need to recap the match. It was everything you would expect. Dax works like a heel. Punk had the fucking people behind him as a babyface. Everything made sense. It looked sharp and snug. It was a contest. There was no ridiculous tumbling. And the people got into it the more that they took them on the ride. If they did do a big move, it was sold. I mean, at the start, Punk shined a little. Then Dax got a little heat. Then there was the comeback. The big 1-2 in the ring. The beautiful superplex. Dax, after they fought for the superplex, instead of just standing up there or climbing up and gingerly assisting each other on the top rope to do a big move that everybody was cooperating on, they fight for the position on the top, block a couple of things, and finally Dax crotches Punk and then gives him a big superplex off the top. They both sell it. And then Dax hits a diving headbutt, gets a 2 count, just barely. Dax goes for a suplex. Punk reverses it. Both of them go over the top rope. Great bump. And they're selling. And that's what brings old Cash Wheeler down to ringside. He's starting to get concerned. Punk hit that crossbody off the top, got a 2 count, and goes into the Anaconda Vice. Dax pulled his hair to break the hold. Imagine that, a heel cheating to break a submission hold. Dax still sent a little nod to the exiled Tully Blanchard. He did the slingshot power bomb, 2 count. And the people are starting to chant, "This is awesome." And they were right for once. It wasn't just meaningless children's tumbling. It was two good pro wrestlers. Punk goes for the GTS. Dax blocks it into the sharpshooter. Punk rolls through into the Anaconda Vice, and Dax has to tap. Great match. I can't fault anybody involved in the match. The fault of anything, if FTR had been booked properly as a dominant heel tag team, then when you split them up into singles, it would have more impact, and it would allow the single star that beats one of the top heel tag guys to shine a little brighter because they'd be over more. But unfortunately, as we know, since FTR was not gifted with the same privilege that not only the major stars, but also the fucking worms of the roster that have their EVP titles and their indie darling status, they were all given the privilege to do whatever the fuck they wanted in their booking. FTR was following the rules and were buried when they came in and have never gotten a chance. So now, and actually, honestly, I think it's too late at this point. You see because the AEW fans have no idea what it takes to be an accomplished professional wrestler. They've seen, and most of the AEW fans, there are some wrestling fans in that group, but they've fallen in love with the fucking kids cosplay crowd, and they just want to see crash and burn bullshit for no reason. And that has kept a lot of the AEW fans from being able to recognize what FTR can do, because they don't know how to look at a good match. They just look at chaos. But if a focused booker that could actually put a roster together that didn't look like a mixture of Victorian antiques and shit from the Sharper Image because it's all over the page, had put something together for FTR with a plan from the start, they would be the most over tag team in the company right now. Because they wouldn't be doing the same goddamn shit every week like the Cucamonga Kids and the rest of their ilk. But anyway, so the only problem I found was that it's just another way to penalize Dax, because everybody wants to work with Dax or Cash in singles because they're the best workers on the roster. So to have a great match and get a good win, you go to FTR. They just never had the opportunity to get over strong before they started getting the shit kicked out of them, because the people in charge of the company didn't know how to book wrestlers. They only know how to book gymnasts and chaos. What'd you think of that match?
Oh, I love that match. It was fantastic. Just to touch on what you just said, I would actually like to see a Cash Wheeler singles match. I don't know if we've ever actually seen one. We've seen a few with Dax. I don't know if we've seen one with Cash. So
we probably will after they beat Dax a few more times, and we'll see Cash doing some jobs also.
This match was excellent, and it was made even better by the fact that they had a super hot crowd. And I thought that was part of the story for me watching it. Here were two guys working a classic wrestling match. A wrestling match that would have worked 20 years ago, 30 years ago. A wrestling match that works today. And the crowd was eating it up, and they were so into it, and they were so loud, and they didn't need to do those flips and everything. If the Young Bucks had opened the show, and I'm not even trying to pick on them, but using them as an example, they would have just gone out there and burned out the crowd with nonstop stuff. And if the crowd went with it, they couldn't have possibly reacted as loud as they did to the stuff in the Punk match.
No.
And they didn't need to do any of that. It says something about what still works. And I think that was one of my big takeaways. And it's the most frustrating thing to me. Tony Khan sits at a table with a headset and a monitor in front of him. And he's watching all of this. And he cares more about all this than any of us do. And he saw the Punk MJF program. And before that, the little brief things we got with, let's say, Punk and Kingston, MJF and Pillman Jr., MJF and Darby. And now Punk is doing this match with Dax. We'll see where this goes with Punk. He wants the belt. That's interesting. MJF has the thing with Wardlow. We'll talk about that later. They called back to Punk. But after seeing all that, A feud that everyone has talked about how good it is. It's not just people like us who are out of touch and hate anything, under the age of 25 or whatever the claim is. Everyone talked about how good it was, the matches, the feud, the logic, the promos, everything. Yet he still lets this other stuff get on the show, on the same show with stuff like this. A serious match that worked, that set a great tone, and then the tone changes. And I know it's kind of like this throw everything against the wall. It's the wrestling circus. We have the elephants. In a little while, we're going to have the clowns, and then we'll have this. But when something works so well, and it sets the tone so well, and it keeps working, every Punk segment, every MJF segment, some other guys are hit or miss, but there are at least two guys that are doing it. Why can't the whole show look like this? It works. Even their fans like it. But instead,
you missed one. Bryan Danielson.
Well, I didn't use Bryan Danielson because they have completely cooled him off to me, and I was as high on him as anyone.
That's the point I was making. You're talking sense there, Brian. You're saying sensible things, but you're not dealing with sensible people. As we will talk about here in just a few minutes, this company had the absolute best in-ring heel in professional wrestling and have just figured out a way to fuck that up. So you can't mean to tell me that you think just because Tony is seeing shit going on in front of him that he's going to fucking realize what he's seeing in front of him. Because no, he can't. Because he's like the guy that wants to put the fucking antique Victorian vase next to the goddamn electronic fucking potato peeler from Sharper Image. He does it. He collects things. He's a collector that picks shit up without any rhyme or reason to how it's going to go together in his collection. He acquires things. He can't focus on getting his previous acquisition in place before he acquires something else, and then he just can't focus. I think that's what it comes down to. He thinks that everybody has a mind that is working at 500 miles an hour, bouncing off the walls, and needs sedation like he does. And he thinks that everybody just wants to see every goddamn thing that they've ever seen before. It's like putting all the animals at the zoo in the same cage. Look at that. Where do you ever see that? You don't. For good fucking reason. Half of them are about to get eaten. It's just a mess. And the individual talents that are given some type of fucking leeway to do their own shit most often shine through, except when it's the comedy half of the program. Anyway,
and you brought
this match, go ahead.
And you brought up the commentary. I just want to say one other thing, because I've been really, really negative on Shivani being on commentary right now. I just don't think he adds anything. He's just saying things that are, I'm so excited to be here. He should be the interviewer. That should be his full-time role. He's fine in it. The fans love him in it. I think if Shivani was off commentary and just doing interviews, it would help a lot. Now, you still need someone. I'm not a fan of a three-man booth, but you definitely need someone to buffer between JR and Excalibur. But I don't think it should be Shivani. He's adding nothing to that role. He adds something to the interview role.
Well, I agree with you there. I wish the buffer between Jim Ross and Excrement would be a large Ford pickup truck that Jim Ross was driving and Excrement was a jaywalker. So anyway, and by the way, Jericho, now you got to admit, he hurt us. He went on a diet. He's cut the carbs. He's lost some weight. He's got a nice fake tan. He's colored his hair. He's looking better physically.
Whose hair?
Jericho's hair. He's colored it.
Whose hair is it?
Well, he bought it. I don't know who he bought it from, but he owns it because he paid for it. But now he's also picked up 3 new stooges. This whole group around him is meant to just be a spotlight for him, because I'm sure he's told these guys he's going to get them over, and they're happy because now they've got a spot. But it's going to be that they get the shit kicked out of them, and so that people don't kick the shit out of him. And basically it's Mo, Larry, and Curly with Jake Hager, the Nasty Wabbit, and the Jericho Appreciation Society. Are these main event fellows? And they didn't try to make them main event fellows before they put them in this thing. They brought them in out of nowhere. They put them on every television. They have not won a fucking match. They've been beaten by everybody in the company. I'm sure they won something on YouTube. I'm talking about in the real world. I love these the AEW fans continue to say, well, you have to watch the YouTube and the dark and the elevation and the this and that. No. If it ain't on fucking national goddamn cable television, it must not be important. I got a limited amount of time. So everybody in the company beats them, and then Jericho brings them in to change their name and make stooges out of them so that everybody can beat them instead of him. And there's Magic Mike and fucking Daddy Luke and Cool Whip Parker. And
that one guy, though, Magic Mike or whatever his fucking name is, the one with the big head, he's got personality.
Yes.
I don't know what he's saying or what he's talking about, but he's got personality. Daniel Garcia, if he didn't open his mouth, he could look a little intimidating because he looks like like I said, like a soccer hooligan. He looks like a fucking classic skinhead out of the fucking ska movement. I'm not saying a skinhead in terms of being a Nazi or anything, but like he just has a look. You could see him starting a fight in a bar until he opens his mouth, and then it's like, oh boy, whatever he's reciting, don't do that again. And I'm already getting sick of all Jericho's catchphrases. Well,
they're trademarked though.
That's not entertainment, Chris. But that's not entertainment.
We'll see more of that in a second. But anyway, so the next match, they follow CM Punk versus Dax Harwood in one of the certainly 10 best singles matches they've ever had in the company. With an 8-man tornado tag team match, all 8 guys in at the same time with no disqualification. Lazy booking. Sting, Darby Allin, and Matt and Jeff Hardy against Private Party and Butcher and Blade with Andre and Jose and Bunny. And they have reunited the Hardy Boys, Matt and Jeff Hardy, and 2 weeks after their reunion, they're in a multi-man, 8-man garbage match with a bunch of middle card nobodies. And nobody is going to point out that this is completely insane. And not only that, but they put them in a garbage match where there's a high probability that one or both of them is going to get injured before they ever capitalize on Jeff Hardy being here at all. It didn't help the ratings. They still did 1 million people, the same 1 million people they do every time they hotshot something. It isn't on pay-per-view. So it hadn't sold any tickets, and now he's wrestled 2 weeks in a row on free television against job guys. And I was in too good a mood from the opening match to watch this because we all knew what it was going to be. Same shit they always do, and there's nothing new to say about it. So as fast forwarding, they were all over the arena. They did some ridiculous stunts, tricks, as they call them. There were some garbage cans. They fought in the arena breezeway. Jeff Hardy did a swanton from 20 feet up the side of the wall through the merchandise table on 2 of these morons that were obviously laying there motionless, scared to death, and able to move anytime they wanted to. And then somehow the babyfaces won in a huge, shocking upset. What? 2 weeks of the Hardy Boys and it's over already? What the fuck? How could you do this on purpose? If you said, I'm going to reunite one of the most popular tag teams in the history of wrestling, and within the first 2 weeks, they will be having shitty matches with underneath guys and nobody will care. And I will not have utilized Jeff Hardy's debut in my company to sell one fucking single ticket. Could you believe this?
I sadly can believe it. And even though I'm not been a big Matt Hardy fan, there was such a better way to do all of this. I will say, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I wondered about this when he first came in, based on the way we've seen him the last several years and, his popularity. whether, despite the fact that the Hardy Boyz were always popular, is the real value bringing him in and making him in a tag team, or Jeff Hardy as a singles wrestler? I actually think maybe they should have brought him in as just Jeff Hardy and put him in the singles division. Because look at what happened. Put him in a tag team division. He's in a match with the Butcher, the Blade, and Private Party. Oh, don't forget Andrade and his assistant. Just what a waste. And they've wasted, we're going past the idea they've wasted Darby and Sting on this show for a little while now, too. But this is ridiculous. This is week 3. He debuted dancing to the ring while saving his brother. Second week he had the match. Now he's in a Texas Tornado free-for-all match. Not one match on pay-per-view yet, tag or single. Could have been built up. First match, Jeff Hardy in AEW. You know, everyone says it's always the same million people, but look at how many people buy the pay-per-view. Hey, then try to pop the pay-per-view rate. Try to pop what your pay-per-view number is going to be. They didn't even try to do that. I really can't explain any of this. It's not logical.
And let's say, when's their next pay-per-view? May, June? Let's say they didn't want to wait that long.
I think it's May. I have to double check.
Okay, let's say they didn't want to wait that long. You could still have promoted the debut of Jeff Hardy on your live national television more in advance and in a better way than 6 hours ahead of time on Twitter. But your idea, I have one disagreement with your idea, otherwise it was good. Yeah, Jeff Hardy as a single may have been better to be brought in like that and put him straight into the singles title picture because, if nothing else, because of the complete rottenness that Matt Hardy's been involved in since this company's been started. It went from embarrassing to just sad, everything that Matt has done. But bringing Jeff Hardy in as a single, now you've got a 45-year-old daredevil that looks and moves like one more swanton's going to break him in half, and you're wanting him to carry the load in singles matches. If this was 10 years ago, yes, they should have bypassed Matt directly for Jeff into the top singles picture. But now at this point, it would have been better for both of those guys who are in their mid to late 40s as a tag team, even with Matt's crummy booking over the last few years and that nobody gave a shit about him anymore. You could still reunite the Hardy Boyz, the sum of the parts greater than the whole, whatever that statement is. And they could, tag team matches, neither one of them would have to do shit that they're obviously not able to do anymore and shouldn't be doing for their physical well-being. But that would have required a top antagonist team, a top heel team, and a great angle to bring Jeff back into the fold with Matt and getting the high-profile match done first so that the fans didn't have time to see, wait a minute, they ain't the boys anymore. They're the Hardy 48-year-olds. Because once they see through that, then your clock is ticking on the way back down on the nostalgia run. This has been botched in every conceivable way that it could be botched.
And by the way, to your point, they aren't the Hardy Boyz anymore. If you notice, they're just the Hardys.
Well, yeah. Just at some point when I was in my 30s, my rich mother had to, fucking stop telling me what to do at some point because it was ridiculous rather than heat getting. Anyway, that's what happened there. Another interview with FTR and Tony in the back where they're talking about the Ass Boys. So now that Dax has done his job putting one of the stars over, now they're back to dealing with underneath tag team programs.
Although, let's be fair, you were the first one before me. You said you saw something in the Gun Boys. I'm not going to call them what you call them. You saw something in them.
Yeah.
I actually saw something in them too. Now, the problem is Dax and Cash have been used like dog shit.
That's what I'm not saying.
Forever.
There's anything wrong with the Ass Boys. I'm saying that here's another. Okay, do you want to beat the Ass Boys with FTR? Well, then you've stopped the Ass Boys' momentum before they've ever got started, which then is that you've done the same thing you did to FTR before they ever got started. They were fucking whipped into line. Nobody's ready to do the favors for the next guy to bring them up because their booking has been so rotten that they're not ready to give a guy a hand up. Anybody, practically. Is that one or two people? And FTR did this interview. They didn't sound confident saying this. They had nothing to say. And they pretty much, I think at this point, know that this cause is lost, which is why they're out looking for select independent bookings, not for the money, but so that they can actually have good matches against good teams. They're working for a billionaire that has a national television show, and they're having to go work independence, not for financial reasons, but just to be professionally fulfilled. This is fucking ridiculous. It's like you got a goddamn violin virtuoso in with a bunch of drunken hillbilly fiddler players. It's fucking ridiculous. Speaking of drunken hillbilly fiddlers, Moxley was next. I don't know. Now I thought he was the CEO of Moxley Plumbing. Now he looks like he's the lost darling brother from Andy Griffith. Should we say it now? We talked about Tony not being able to see shit in front of him. Bryan Danielson as a single heel was possibly the best thing in wrestling in any company. And they changed it. And Bryan Danielson's talent was making it work. He was getting booed the fuck out of the building by a bunch of people that respect him as the best wrestler in the business. But because of his talent and his verbal ability and the little things he does, he was able to turn them and be the best heel in the business. And instead of capitalizing on that and changing plans they'd made 2 years ago when everybody was blowing each other about how great they were all going to be, instead of not putting the belt on fucking Adam Page, who's a fine Intercontinental Champion, as you've mentioned, and putting that belt on Bryan Danielson so that everything that didn't revolve around Punk could revolve around him. Now they've backed up, and now the people are cheering Danielson again because he's being managed by the beloved William Regal, and they've stuck Moxley on the edge of him to make him somehow palatable. And now to see Danielson and or Regal, we've got to watch Moxley. You couldn't have begged, borrowed, or stolen Bryan Danielson being the best heel in the business. It just occurred. It happened. He got it over, and they've completely disrupted the whole goddamn thing. Is that what you were pissed about earlier?
I couldn't agree anymore. Bryan Danielson had segments that I was looking forward to. I loved his crowd interplay. I loved the way he was on the mic. It felt natural. He was great as an in-ring working heel. I was excited about where they were going to go with that. I was even willing to sit through the idea he would work a program with Moxley. But I thought it would end. I thought it would end and he would move on to something else, continuing his greatness. I didn't think they were going to put him in a tag team as part of the Blackpool Fight Club or whatever with William Regal, who isn't going to get booed. He was so good, and like you just said, you said it perfectly. It was right under Tony's nose. He sees it like we see it. He observes it on the monitor like we see it. I don't know if he sees it like we see it. But Danielson, for a very brief moment in time there, was doing the best work of his best work in many, many, many years, and then it just ended, and now I hate that it ended, and I have to say because of William Regal, because I like William Regal, and he's been great on commentary. But this isn't what I would have done.
Moxley and Danielson against Brian Pillman and Griff Garrison, the Varsity Blondes. So in this match, the heels kicked the shit out of the baby faces and beat them flat as 4 o'clock, and the fans cheered every second of it. If somebody had come to anybody, any promoter, any booker of any territory ever and said, I will give you $100,000 in 2 weeks, make it so that your hottest heel is cheered to the rafters and vice versa, they couldn't have done it on purpose. It's almost impossible. Nobody's, of course, ever tried to do these things. But yeah, take your hottest heel and make them the most popular people you got, and take your baby faces and bury the fuck out of them. And Julia Hart's sitting there in the corner. She's still got the eye patch on, and she's got some kind of malfunction. And I can't imagine how bad this is going to be when we find out what that is, but she just sits there and turns her back on the ring and mopes. So after this match, and thanks for coming, Brian Pillman and Griff Garrison, another ball they dropped was Pillman. And at least this time, I think, did they beat Griff this time? Remember, they were beating Pillman constantly when he was the only one that had any fucking upside. Griff Garrison, if he turns sideways, sticks his tongue out, he looks like a fucking zipper. Then after the match, Moxley does a promo. And he puts Regal over, and everybody cheers. Then he puts Danielson over as the greatest wrestler in the world. And the fans cheer. Again, they were booing him out of the arena 3 weeks ago. The perfect heel, the perfect champion. And now they've blown it. And then Moxley droned on forever in the way that he usually does. William Regal didn't speak. Bryan Danielson didn't speak. They just stood there and then they left. God damn it. Now they've ruined him. They're doing this on purpose just because we like something. You know that. As a matter of fact, the guy in the front row had the sign all night. Cornette will not like this. You're right, whoever you were. You want to talk about MJF's segment?
Yeah, let's please move past the Moxley Danielson segment.
Let's move right on by. MJF was out with Sean Spears and his security. Now he's hired his own security. And it was the promo about Wardlow. Wardlow wasn't good enough to beat Scorpio. He's a pig. MJF did tell Punk there will be a rematch because Punk cheated to win, and he will attend Punk's funeral and piss on his grave. Trademark infringement, Max. Stephen P. New calls. Better answer the phone. The people are obviously behind Wardlow. And again, this is one of those things where all they need to do is just shepherd the folks in the direction they're already going. Just come right along with us. You're already going in that direction anyway. I'll accompany you. We'll take you right where we want you to go. But no! Because they always have to throw a stumbling block in through, you know what the P6 principle is, don't you, Brian?
No, what's that?
Poor pre-planning leads to piss poor performance. They thought this was going to be MJF did a great interview, and he also said, Wardlow, you don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, which that's a Mama Cornette line. So he's using my stuff and he's using Mama Cornette's stuff. But he does the promo. Wardlow signed a deal with the devil. He can't get out of it. He said, I'm going to strap Wardlow to a cross like Jesus. Can you say that shit on television? That used to be something that might get kicked off television. Talking about that old crucifixion.
There were a few things said on this episode of Dynamite that I wasn't offended by, but I was surprised they got said on TV.
Yeah. I mean, I'm offended by very little except for bad phony wrestling. Otherwise, you can say anything. But I wince when things are said on television that, anyway, he's going to evict Wardlow's mother. But here's where the thing fell in the fucking hole. Wardlow comes out and has a bad fight with security, and security overwhelms him and holds him and immobilizes him there while MJF continues the promo while Wardlow has to, quote, sit there and listen to it. Bad mistake. Not only have they just been watching the other channel for 2 or 3 weeks to see how Brock Lesnar treats security. That's the way you get over. They have their big man Wardlow come out and be immobilized by a bunch of job guys in black T-shirts and listen to the dressing down. And then when security let him go, he backs out with a mean look on his face and MJF keeps talking. They could have done this right and been accused of copying Brock Lesnar, but it still would have been done right. Or they could have done this exactly like this and buried Wardlow as a goof, which is what they did. You don't immobilize a guy like that. if you've got the security there, they should have been fodder for him to fucking beat up and throw around while MJF made his escape and even got to Spears. MJF need to be the one to make the escape. Yes, of course, they're doing the same thing on the other channel. Well, here's an idea. Just don't do the same thing they're doing on the other channel. Or if you're going to do it, don't make your guy look so much worse than the other channel's guy. Wardlow's a dipshit with his dick in his hand after this. Have you ever seen security hold the babyface monster and immobilize him like that?
Again, like you said, it's not just Brock Lesnar. We've seen other guys. We saw 10 of the Dark Order beat the shit out of a bunch of security guards a few weeks ago on TV.
That's 10 of them.
We saw 10 of the Dark Order, not 10 different.
10 of the okay, I see what the guy named 10.
The number 10 of the Dark Order beat up a bunch of security guards. So I agree with you, but
but Wardlow can't.
I think you're right. The fans are behind Wardlow, but I actually think the promo a couple of weeks ago was a mistake. And I think this was a mistake. I think it's one of those things, build the heat, say as little as possible, be on the mic as little as possible. In a way, give the fans as little of Wardlow as possible. Just make them wait to really want that match with him and MJF. And
don't let Wardlow talk, let Wardlow do. Let MJF talk and let Wardlow do.
Yes.
And Wardlow was talking, and then he wasn't doing. What about if MJF had come to the ring? This is out of my ass completely now. I just thought of this. If MJF comes out the ring and starts cutting a promo with Spears and says, and I've got security standing by because since Wardlow doesn't work for AEW, he works for me, and I've told him he better not be here tonight. I've got security that I'm paying standing at the back door. They will not let him in the goddamn building. And then you could break a camera loose to go to the back door and see Wardlow is pulled up, and he sees that through the fucking double doors, the back of the arena, through the windows, he can see these guys standing there, and he tries to open the door, and it's locked. And the guy walks up and says, shakes his head, you can't come in. And then MJF continues doing his fucking promo. And all of a sudden, you go back to the camera shot because maybe MJF refers to something in the back like they're going to be there all night. Make sure Wardlow can't fucking come in. And just then, you see Wardlow driving a fucking pickup truck through both those doors, sending a couple of the security guys up over the fucking hood. I've done that to somebody before. They weren't hurt too bad. And that's the way he comes in the fucking building. And then he can drive the goddamn truck. Moxley can come out of the parking lot every goddamn week. Why can't Wardlow drive the pickup truck that he just bashed the doors into the arena and jump out of it, and MJF's already run off, or whatever, anything other than being emasculated, having his cock cut off, and being held there while he was given a verbal dressing down, and then let go and allowed to back out of the arena with a mean face. Fuck you. I want a goddamn homicidal maniac after MJF, not a goddamn putz. They made Wardlow a putz. All right, are we moving on?
I think so.
Okay.
I hope so.
So now Trent and Muffin Top and Pockets are exchanging fake verbiage, upset at Wheeler Yuta for probably the fucking ballet tights he was wearing last week, but also for walking off away from them and joining William Regal. So wait a minute. I got a fucking idiot that works at Jiffy Lube with his hands in his pockets, a fucking guy named Taylor that looks like a fucking baked good gone wrong, and Trent, who can't even figure out what his last name is, and they want me to hang around with them, or I can go hang around with William Regal, Bryan Danielson, and the plumber. Good Lord. All right, next match. Jay Lethal versus Adam Cole. Again, what an amazing match this could have been. If Adam Cole had been booked seriously and properly since he showed up, and if Jay Lethal had been booked at all, in any fashion, since he showed up, again, all over the place, just collecting names and collecting toys and collecting items is Tony Khan, and then you don't see him. Jay Lethal looks great. He works great. He's in shape. It's not his fault that he hasn't been used, that he was brought in and signed and then forgotten about and then fucking sidelined. He hasn't defeated anybody of any consequence. So he's an intermittently seen loser now. And Adam Cole is a joke, a shade of his former self that was beaten by an aggressive hug by the company mascot. So the people would have been red hot if this was Adam Cole and Jay Lethal in places that they used to be, where they were actually over fighting each other, but instead it's here. And so they had a great match. And, you know, it won't be followed up on. Nobody will remember it next week. And I'm sure that Jay will disappear again. But Adam Cole looked more like his old self. Even if he did quit training, at least he was actually acting seriously. And they went through a break, and Jay Lethal got most of the match. Thankfully that Cole did that, since Jay's booking has been so substandard. They did some nice back and forth going for the figure four. And then Jay went for the lethal injection. Cole hits him with a super kick, hits the Panama Sunrise, 2 count. And Lethal gets the roll up, but the referee is distracted by Fish and O'Reilly, and Lethal goes for the lethal injection. Cole ball shots him. I guess now his deal is he just hits people in the nuts and beats them. Because I guess they figure, well, a guy got beat by pockets, so how is the only way in the world he's going to whip another grown adult man, kick him in the nuts? And he did that, and then knee to the head, 1, 2, 3. Your thoughts on the match before I'll tell you how they fucked that up too.
It was fine for what it was. The bloom is off the rose with me and Adam Cole.
Yeah.
It's once you see how small he is, it's hard not to see it. It was interesting to learn that Jay Lethal, what'd they say? He was the number 3 contender for the title or something? And I was like, I thought they were like, the one thing they were saying is like the statistics were the legitimate thing Tony takes really seriously. Then how the fuck, if this is one of those he wins matches on YouTube but only loses on national TV, then what are we doing? What is that?
He wins the matches you don't see, and he loses all the ones you do. But again, it was a good match. Could have been better with any oomph behind either guy, but a good match. But then Adam Cole got the microphone, and I wrote, now they're going to fuck this up. They've got by with this segment. It wasn't bad. But now Adam Cole is still saying he ought to be the world champion. Paige is scared of him. How do they think this is working? How do they think this has ever been of interest to anybody? Cole comes in and is immediately sidelined by being the second most impressive debut in his own segment. Then his first program is with the Goof, the mascot, who he loses to by a fake move that didn't even look good. Then he gets his cohorts, Fish and O'Reilly, to have some 6-man tags where they do win by fucking people. And now he thinks that anybody thinks that he's going to be the world champion, or that anybody even thinks that Adam Page should be the world champion. It's like this world title program is amongst underneath indie guys, while the real stars on the program have tag team matches.
You know, that's one of the things, too. We've talked about the fact that Adam Page doesn't come across like a world champion, not acting like a world champion. I don't think fans think of him as a world champion. But I also think the feud with Adam Cole hasn't done anything to help him.
No. They had Danielson do a favor for him. And that's all that has been done to make Adam Page seem credible as a world champion. He gets weak challengers that get weaker as they go along. And the one thing that Adam Cole said, he had a great line, Page doesn't have the guts to come out here and face the 3 of us man to man. Well, that was great. But Page comes out because that's predictable, because that's what happens on every show multiple times on every company. Page immediately jumps him. Cole ball shots him. They get a smidge of heat. Here comes Jungle Boy and Dino Douche and Christian Cage. the hardest working man in catering. He's going to out-eat everybody. That's the only thing else they let him do. And they make save and the heels run off. Remember when this might have meant something? The heels outnumbering the champion and beating on him until he gets saved. It didn't happen 5 times in every program from every company. So that was that. What do you think about Sammy Guevara and old Ty Conti?
Well, it went from we didn't know they were a couple to everyone will know they are a couple.
Yes. And boy, when Sammy was with his previous girlfriend, what was her name? Oh, Phoebe Figalili or whatever her name was. She was wearing my Aunt Lola's couch cushion cover. That muumuu she had on when he proposed marriage to her about 6 months ago. Now he's dropped the plain Jane. He's traded up to this girl wearing fishnets and tennis shoes. Boy, she looked like a... We talk about old Penelope Pitstop being a prim and proper vision of propriety. Well, this girl's just a virgin if ever I've seen one. This whole point of this thing was that Sammy Guevara comes out there and tells the people that he'll always do crazy shit that makes no sense if they'll just chant holy shit. He doesn't care whether he cripples himself and pays for it or not. It's worth it. And then he gives the microphone to his girlfriend. Where is she from? What language was she speaking?
I believe she's Brazilian, so it would be Portuguese if that's the case.
Okay, well, she started out in English, I think. Then she went all the way to Portuguese, I'm pretty sure, because I couldn't recognize any of the words. And she made some really weird faces, because this is probably the 3rd television interview she's ever done in her life. And she's mad at Paige Van Zandt, who's not there. And out comes Lambert and the other Paige and Scorpio Sky. And they say Van Zandt is not there, and I fast-forwarded because fuck this. If I'm not going to see Paige Van Zandt, this is just at this point. Good God.
Oh, how did you fast-forward what was one of the most cringe-inducing things on the whole show?
What did I miss?
That Lambert kissed the TNT title, and they're going back and forth, and then Sammy and Ty basically said that Sammy came all over the TNT title when they were fucking, and that's what Dan was kissing, and now there's a piece of them inside of Dan. And he, got grossed out and
that actually was said and happened on television.
I was about to say more eloquently than I said, but I don't think it was any more eloquently than I
God
said.
damn. Well, I'm sorry. I can't fast forward any of this program. They're constantly embarrassing themselves.
That's why I said earlier when you brought up the MJF comment, there were multiple comments on this show. That segment, this segment, the Vicky Guerrero Thunder Rosa confrontation. Which is a Hall of Fame segment in some people's eyes. There were things said on this week's show that I was surprised, and I'm curious if this will continue.
Well, I was anxious for it to be over at this point because, again, we started as far up as we could go, and we've been free-falling ever since. And after Sammy Guevara, and it's the stupidest to have a babyface come out and say, I don't care whether I win or lose, whether I cripple myself. I just want to make you people go, holy shit. What a fucking moron. If I liked the guy as a fan wrestler relationship, that would make me not like him because that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. I don't like people that say stupid things. I respect and admire and look up to accomplished people who win more than they lose and who don't say stupid shit that make themselves sound like idiots. That's who I want to look up to if I'm looking for a hero. We're holding out for a hero. We didn't find one in the next match, though. I'm sorry I missed the cum promo about jizzing on the belt. Hopefully Dan did brush his teeth afterwards. Red Velvet wrestled Layla Hirsch. They jump-started on the floor, and I jumped onto my fast-forward button.
Oh, you should have watched it.
Oh, come on.
Red Velvet's good. I like Red Velvet. I think Red Velvet has something.
I don't care. Yeah, fine. And I like her with icing, too, even better. But when we've gone from Punk and Dax, and then we've gone downhill to not too far, but at least after the 8-man thing, to seeing Bryan Danielson And then we get to see MJF and then Jay Lethal and Adam Cole, and the show is over. They just quit trying at this point. And we get Sammy and Conti and Lambert and Velvet and Hirsch, and then Tony with Thunder Rosa and Vicky Guerrero in the Hall of Fame cringe segment. Thunder Rosa gets 2 words in, and here comes Vicky Guerrero screeching worse than ever. Excuse me. And they have an argument over both of them being from Texas, and I actually couldn't understand what either one of them was saying because of Vicky's. What did JR say? There's a lot of stray dogs around here starting to bark. And then Nyla Rose comes out and jumps Thunder Rosa from behind and beats her up. Another. It wasn't backstage. It was out on the stage out in front of everybody, but it's still another fight between girls that get jumped in an interview. Number 747. And with the screeching and the excusing, and did I miss anything that would have redeemed this?
No, there's no redeeming value to this in any way. The fact that the first challenger for Thunder Rosa is going to be Nyla Rose was not what I would do either. And
remember 2.5 years ago, we said, well, Nyla Rose would be a hell of a heel women's champion. And that would have been the case until she's been beaten by every 90-pound Lilliputian project of Twinkle Toeses and every other girl on the roster, and then goes away for long periods of time, and you don't know where she is, and her manager is only used whenever she needs to say, excuse me. But otherwise than that, Nyla Rose would be great to go for the title.
Problem is they put her with Vicky Guerrero. Vicky Guerrero's terrible.
Why is that the Guerrero that Tony didn't ghost? Why didn't he talk to Chavo and ghost Vicky? All right, finally, the main event on this program that, by the way, also contained CM Punk versus Dax Harwood. The Dork Order against Danny Garcia and Chris Jericho with Daddy Magic, Bugs Hager, and Cool Whip Parker. And, of course, they're the most popular heels in recorded history because everybody was singing the song at the top of their lungs when they came out, and this was the main event. We had another nearly 15 minutes to go on the air, so I took this opportunity to say, fuck this shit, and I hit delete. What'd I miss?
See, again, I wish you wouldn't have been so stubborn here. Jericho got thrown on his head, or Jericho landed on his head, I should say, from a brainbuster on the floor spot.
A brainbuster on the floor, and Jericho's the one's taking it?
From the Dark Order guy who's 5'4".
Jesus Christ.
So I wish you would have seen that. It is what it is. I'm not a Dark Order fan. I don't find any redeeming value in any of the Dark Order, despite some of their comedic efforts. And I didn't really care much. I kind of watched, but I kind of was zoning in and out.
So again, what'd they have? Did they get 1 million this week? They got 1 million last week. Were they up, down, same?
I'd have to check. I don't have it in front of me.
Well, maybe we'll figure that out later. It certainly didn't set the world on fire. People would have been screaming about it. But again, they start so good and you have hope. And then self-inflicted gunshot wounds to the toes. Every time, by the time the show is over, you're like, why did I watch this whole thing? I should have just quit while I was ahead.
1,046,000 viewers.
There you go. The worst in the last 3 months was what, 860 something? The best is right around there. They signed the Hardys. No difference. Danielson, no difference. Punk, everybody, no difference. They go up and then they come right back down because they keep giving them the same kind of shitty television program that doesn't make any sense because their ADD-ridden core audience just wants to see a bunch of guys jump up and down on top of each other. They don't care if it's fake. They don't care if it doesn't make any sense because they're not bright people and they can't follow that shit that makes sense, that they have to think about. They just want to see monkeys in the cage swinging at each other. But they're not going to get anybody else. Most adults require shit to make sense and to If we know that it's a work and we know that it's a prearranged entertainment spectacle, most people are still going to want you to make it look good. So they're not going to make any more stars that you can sign away or pick up, Tony. Sooner or later, they're going to run out of them. The WWE can't fire everybody. Everybody's contract's not going to come up. You're running out of places to find them. Start worrying about doing a good television program. You've got these people behind you and they love you. Find a few more, because they're not going to just gobble down this gook that you're hand feeding your faithful. They want professionalism. They want shit to make sense. They want a little logic. They don't want substandard, goofy, phony, silly talent. They want stars. And they've gone 2.5 years now, and they've increased the talent. The quality of the talent is the best it's ever been compared to what they started with. The show is still rotten because the booking is still rotten. Individual segments shine like new pennies. Overall, it's rotten. Because did I mention the booking there's not booking. There is no booking here. If they had booking, it would be better. They've got a guy with some form of artificially induced energy and a really shitty attention span, just writing people's names down with ludicrous stipulations, and they do the same thing over and over again. The same people might be entertained by that, Tony, but the new ones ain't, because you ain't got any. Make some new fans. Calm down with the goofiness and the chaos and concentrate on talent that can speak to people and make shit look good. My weekly advice